priest was still speaking when my son-in-law leaned over and whispered that he had a work call he couldn't miss. I turned to look at him. My daughter was in that casket, his wife, the mother of his child. And he was telling me about a work call. I didn't say anything. I just watched him stand up, button his jacket, and walk down the center aisle of the church like he was leaving a meeting that ran long. My granddaughter was sitting between us. She was 6 years old and she was holding a small white flower she'd picked from the arrangement near the altar. She didn't watch her father leave. She already knew to stop watching for things that weren't going to happen. I held her hand and I listened to the priest finish. My daughter's name was Claire. She was 41 years old. She taught 3rd grade at an elementary school in Franklin, Tennessee, and every single one of her former students, the ones who were now in high school, the ones who had kids of their own, every one of them sent flowers. The church ran out of space for them. They lined the steps outside, down the sidewalk, past the parking lot. I walked through them that morning and I couldn't speak. She died on a Tuesday. The doctor called it sudden cardiac arrhythmia. She was healthy. She ran half marathons. She didn't smoke, barely drank, ate better than anyone I knew. The cardiologist said these things happen sometimes, that the heart can have a defect no one ever detects, that it was nobody's fault. I told myself to believe that for 23 days. Then I found the email. I should explain something about Claire. She was the kind of person who planned for everything. She had a folder on her computer for every tax return going back to 2009. She had a laminated card in her wallet with her blood type, her doctor's phone number, and the name of my attorney in case of emergency. When she was pregnant with my granddaughter, she set up a college savings account before she even left the hospital. She also set up an email, one I didn't know about, scheduled to send to me automatically 60 days after the last time she logged in. The subject line said, "Dad, if you're reading this, I need you to find something." I was sitting at my kitchen table in Nashville when it arrived. It was a Thursday morning, just past 7. I had a cup of coffee in my hand and I was watching the birds at the feeder Claire had bought me 2 Christmases ago. I almost didn't open it. I thought it was spam. I almost deleted it. I read it 4 times before I stood up. She wrote that she was scared. She didn't know if she was being dramatic, she said, but she'd rather be dramatic and wrong than silent and right. She said her husband, my son-in-law, had been acting strangely for over a year, moving money, taking calls in the garage at night. She'd found a document on his laptop she wasn't supposed to see, something about a life insurance policy she hadn't agreed to, larger than anything they'd discussed. She said she'd confronted him and he'd explained it away and she'd almost believed him. Almost. She told me there was a folder inside her filing cabinet, the green one she kept in the spare bedroom closet. Behind the hanging folders, tapes to the back panel. She said, "Don't tell him you found it. Don't let him know you're looking. Please, Dad. I don't know if I'm right, but if something happens to me, I need someone to know." Something had happened to her. I put the coffee cup in the sink. I got in my truck and I drove to her house. My son-in-law's name is Stuart. He is 44 years old. He sells commercial real estate and he is very good at it, which means he is very good at making you feel like you're getting exactly what you want while he's getting exactly what he came for. I never trusted him the way I probably should have told Claire I didn't trust him. I smiled at his jokes at Thanksgiving. I shook his hand at Little League games. I told myself I was being the kind of father-in-law who minds his own business. I wish I hadn't been that kind of father-in-law. When I got to the house that morning, his car wasn't in the driveway. My granddaughter was at school. I still had a key. Claire had given it to me years ago in case of emergency, she'd said, and I suppose this qualified. The house felt different without her in it. Quieter in the wrong way. I stood in the front hallway for a moment and I let myself feel that, and then I made myself move. The spare bedroom was at the end of the hall. The green filing cabinet was in the closet, just like she said. I knelt down and pulled out the hanging folders, utility bills, insurance documents, the deed to the house, and I reached to the back panel. The envelope was there, taped exactly where she said. Inside was a printed copy of a life insurance policy. $2 million taken out 18 months before she died, with Stewart listed as the sole beneficiary. There was a printed email exchange between Stewart and someone I didn't recognize, a woman named in the thread only as V, discussing what they called the timeline. There were 3 photographs, printed on regular paper, of Stewart and a woman I'd never seen, taken at what looked like a hotel somewhere. And there was a handwritten note from Claire in her handwriting that said, "I found these in April. I should have called you then. I'm sorry I waited. I sat on the floor of that closet for a long time. Then I heard the garage door open. I don't know how I moved as fast as I did. I am 67 years old, and I have a bad left knee that I've been putting off replacing for 2 years. But I was out of that closet and down the hall and in the kitchen before the door from the garage even opened. I shoved the envelope into the inside pocket of my jacket. I turned on the faucet. I picked up a glass from the drying rack and I stood there running water into it when Stewart walked in. He stopped when he saw me. I used my key, I said. I hope that's all right. I wanted to see if Haley left her backpack here this morning. She mentioned it at drop-off. He looked at me for a moment. Something moved across his face, not quite suspicion, not quite relief. Something in between. She probably left it in her room, he said. I'll check. I watched him go down the hall. I poured the water out and put the glass back on the rack. My hands were not shaking. I was surprised by that. He came back and said he didn't see the backpack, but it might be in the car. He said I should have called first. He said it like it was friendly advice. I told him I was sorry for the intrusion. I told him I missed her. I looked at him when I said that, and I watched him look back at me, and I thought, you know that I know something. You just don't know what. I drove away slowly. I didn't go to the police. Not yet. First, I called my attorney. His name is Dale, and we have been friends for 30 years, since before Claire was born, since before I was the person I am now. He is not a criminal attorney, but he knows people who are. He listened to me for 20 minutes without interrupting, which is the most valuable thing a person can do for you when you are trying to hold yourself together. He said before you do anything, you need to know what you actually have. He said the life insurance policy alone isn't evidence of anything except that a husband took out a policy on his wife, which is common. He said the email exchange was suggestive, but the name V meant nothing without context. He said the photographs proved an affair, not a crime. He said, what else did she have? That she maybe didn't know she had. That's when I remembered something Claire had mentioned once, months before she died. We'd been on the phone, she was tired and talking about nothing in particular, and she said Stewart had started using a different doctor. A concierge practice, she called it, a private one, not their regular family physician. She'd thought it was strange, but hadn't asked about it. She said, you know how he is, Dad. He doesn't like questions. I called the Williamson County Medical Examiner's office that afternoon. I explained who I was. I told them my daughter had died of sudden cardiac arrhythmia, and I had new information that suggested the cause of death might not have been natural. I expected to be dismissed. I expected a form to fill out, a case number, a callback in 6 to 8 weeks. Instead, the woman I spoke to asked me to come in the next morning. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my armchair with the envelope on the table in front of me, and I thought about Claire at 6 years old, the same age Haley is now. How she used to fall asleep in the car on the way home from her grandmother's house, and I'd carry her inside without waking her. How she'd wake up in her own bed and think it was magic. How she told me once when she was maybe 8 or 9 that she felt safe when I was around. I had not kept her safe. I know that thought is not rational. I know I could not have known, but it sat with me that night and I let it because I think sometimes you have to feel the full weight of something before you can carry it properly. At 7 the next morning, I drove to the county offices on Holt Road. The investigator I met with was a careful, quiet man who asked good questions and wrote everything down. He told me the original autopsy had flagged an irregular potassium level but attributed it to post-mortem changes. He said that in light of what I brought, he wanted to request a supplemental toxicological analysis. He said it would take several weeks. He said I should not discuss this with anyone connected to Stewart. I asked about Haley. He said that was a separate matter, and that if I had concerns about her immediate safety, I should contact family court. I called Dale from the parking lot. Within 48 hours, I had filed for emergency temporary guardianship of my granddaughter, on the grounds that her remaining parent was the subject of a potential homicide investigation. Dale said it was a long shot at that stage. A family court judge disagreed. Haley came to stay with me the following Friday, with a bag of clothes and her backpack and a stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was born. She climbed into the guest bed and pulled the covers up and said, "Grandpa, is Daddy in trouble?" I sat on the edge of the mattress. I tucked the blanket around her the way Claire used to tuck it around her. "I'm working on some things," I said, "but you're safe here. That's what matters right now." She looked at me for a moment. Then she closed her eyes. The supplemental toxicology report came back on a Wednesday 6 weeks after I'd filed the request. The finding was unambiguous: elevated ethylene glycol metabolites consistent with ingestion over an extended period. Ethylene glycol is the primary component in antifreeze. In small repeated doses, it mimics natural cardiac events. It is odorless. It can be added to a drink without detection. If no one is looking for it, no one finds it. They had not been looking for it. The medical examiner amended the cause of death to suspected poisoning, pending further investigation. The Franklin Police Department opened a homicide case. Dale called me the morning the warrant was issued, and I sat down on the kitchen floor and stayed there for a while. Stewart was arrested on a Thursday afternoon at the commercial real estate office where he worked, in front of 3 colleagues and an administrative assistant who would later describe the scene to the local news. He said nothing when they read him his rights. He asked for his attorney. The woman referenced in the emails, the one my daughter had photographed, the one called V, was a licensed practical nurse who had worked at the concierge practice Stewart had recently joined. She was brought in for questioning 2 days later. She cooperated in exchange for consideration on the charges against her. She confirmed that Stewart had asked her, in the months before Claire's death, about substances that could cause cardiac events without easy detection. She said she had assumed he was asking for a story he was writing. She said she knew that wasn't true even as she was saying it. There is a thing people don't tell you about the period after an arrest. It is not relief exactly. It is something quieter and harder to name. The days kept happening. I made Haley's lunches and drove her to school and helped her with her reading and watched her draw at the kitchen table the way Claire used to draw at that same table, with the same focused expression, the same small line between her eyebrows when she was concentrating. I thought about Claire every day. I still do. I thought about her in April, noticing something wrong and printing out emails and hiding them in a filing cabinet instead of calling me. I understood why she didn't. She loved him once. She had a child with him. She was probably hoping she was wrong. I understood all of it, and I also wished with everything I had that she had called me instead. She had always been the kind of person who tried to handle things herself first. She got that from me. The trial was set for 14 months after the arrest. Stewart entered a not guilty plea. His attorney filed a series of motions I won't detail here. Dale kept me informed but advised me not to attend the pre-trial hearings, not because I wasn't welcome, but because he knew me well enough to know what it would cost me to sit in that room. I respected that advice exactly once, and then I stopped. I attended every pre-trial hearing. I sat in the second row. I did not make eye contact with Stewart. I watched the proceedings with the same attention I used to give to the things that mattered most in my life. And I took notes in a small notebook I kept in my jacket pocket, the same pocket where I'd carried that envelope the day I found it. The trial lasted 9 days. The toxicology evidence was damning in the way that scientific precision is damning, not dramatic, not emotional, just conclusive. The nurse testified for 3 hours. The forensic accountant testified about the life insurance policy, about the financial transfers Stewart had made in the 18 months preceding Claire's death, about the beneficiary designations he had quietly changed without her knowledge. Her email was entered into evidence, the one she'd written to me, scheduled to send if she ever stopped logging in. The prosecutor read sections of it aloud in the courtroom. I sat in the second row and I listened to my daughter's voice come out of a stranger's mouth, and I did not look away. The jury deliberated for 11 hours. The forewoman read the verdict on a gray Tuesday afternoon in October. guilty on all counts. First-degree murder, conspiracy, financial fraud. The courtroom was not loud. It was the opposite of loud. It was the kind of silence that fills a room when something has been made right that cannot actually be made right. When justice and grief occupy the same moment and neither one cancels the other out. I drove home. I picked Haley up from school. We went to the park near the house and she played on the climbing structure while I sat on a bench and watched her. She called out to me from the top of the slide, "Watch, Grandpa." I watched. She came down laughing, her hair flying, and she ran around to climb back up. And I thought about Claire at that age, and I thought about the filing cabinet in the spare bedroom closet, and I thought about how my daughter had known something was wrong and had taken care, in her meticulous, quiet way, to make sure I would know too. She had left me a trail. She had trusted me to follow it. I did, Claire. I did. Haley has been with me full time since the verdict. We painted her room a pale yellow she picked herself from the sample cards at the hardware store. She started second grade this fall at the school 3 blocks from my house. She has a best friend named Zoe, and they are inseparable in the way only 7-year-olds can be, total and uncomplicated and absolute. She asks about her mother sometimes at night, the way children ask about the things that are too big for daytime. I tell her the truth in the way you tell truth to a child. In pieces, at the right size, with enough light around it to be bearable. She has her mother's eyes, the same focus when she's drawing, the same small line between her eyebrows. I watch her and I feel two things at once, every single time, and I have stopped trying to separate them. The grief and the gratitude live in the same place. I think they always will. I am 67 years old and I did not save my daughter. But I am here every morning, making her daughter's lunch and driving her to school and watching her go through the doors with her backpack on. That is what I have left to do. I am doing it.